At this point, we have dissected enough to get a really good view of the larynx and the trachea within the neck of the pig. In order to see how the trachea extends further into the thoracic cavity, we need to continue our dissection. So our goal now is to view the organs within the thoracic cavity. To do this, you're going to take your scissors and continue to cut down along the chest wall. In order to get inside of the thoracic cavity, you're going to have to cut through the bone. You're going to be cutting the ribs. So the easiest way to do this is with the scissors. You're going to start cutting the bone. Take care to keep the scissors close to the surface of your cuts and don't go too deep. You don't want to damage the organs underneath. Stay to one side of the sternum. When you reach the point of the diaphragm, stop. Now take your scissors, make a cut to the side just anterior to that diaphragm. Again, keep your scissors towards the surface. We can start to see some of the organs inside. So what we're going to view within the thoracic cavity is going to be our heart and lungs. And we can further see the trachea as it comes down and branches into the two main bronchi. So let's cut over on this side. And you'll notice we have the pericardium attached here around our heart. It's okay, you're going to have to break some of these ribs and push it back. Now that we are in the thoracic cavity, you might have to take a look at the insides and see if you need to be rinsed out or dried out. I'm going to take some paper towels and just dry out some of the fluid that's collecting down at the bottom. I'm going to cut off some of the ribs here so we have a better view. You do not have to do this at home. At this point, we can see our heart, our lungs, and if you look closely, if I move the lung to the side just a little bit, we can see sitting right on top of the heart is another gland. This is the thymus, which we saw up in the neck, but it continues all the way down and sits on the anterior portion of the heart. If you also look closely, the heart sits within this membrane, this pericardium, and the probe is now even sitting in the pericardial cavity. So there's our heart, lungs. So if you can move the lungs to the side, and we can go ahead and remove the pericardium from around the heart. You'll notice it's very tough and strong. And using your scissors, you can actually go in there and remove the heart. It's possible you should be able to find some of our main vessels as well, like the aorta, the vena cava, and the pulmonary trunk. So when you get a chance, take a close look at your heart. See if you can't identify some of the structures. You can see the auricles. You can see the outside of the heart where our ventricles would be placed. If you look closely, you can even see the pulmonary trunk coming up over in the anterior portion of the heart. Now that we have removed the heart, we have a better view of the lungs. And go ahead and feel them. They're soft, but they're quite firm. These lungs are firmer than what you would see in an adult because the fetal pig has not taken its first breath. So these have never been inflated with air. If you start to dissect a little more now, we can start to see in here how far the trachea goes. So we're getting a pretty good view of the trachea now. As it extends from the larynx, trachea, and you can even see it branching to the right and left lungs. The trachea, just like in the human, has cartilaginous rings to it. These are incomplete rings, and if you feel it with your finger, they have some firmness to them. As we extend all the way down, you see it branching into our main bronchi to the lungs. Behind the trachea, so I can take my probe and go right under the trachea here, is a softer, collapsed tube. This structure is the esophagus, and it sits dorsal to the trachea in our fetal pig. In a human, you would call this posterior to the trachea. So there is the esophagus, which is going to take us down to the stomach. The trachea, which takes us down to the lungs. Posterior to the lungs, or in the human, that would be inferior, we have the diaphragm. That's this muscle sitting right here that goes from edge to edge that separates the thoracic from the abdominopelvic cavity. So make sure to find the diaphragm. Contraction of the diaphragm would result in inflation of the lungs, and relaxation of our diaphragm here would result in exhalation. So that is the thoracic cavity for our fetal pig.